Welcome everyone. Today is the first day of the book of Exodus and we are working through chapters 1 to 3 today. So without further ado, let's get straight into chapter 1. So just to give you a bit of background, that Exodus actually means departure of the Israelites from Egypt. So that is why it's called the book of Exodus. So we start, because we've finished now the book of Genesis, we're moving into this book, and we start with the families from Jacob going to Egypt. They're living in Egypt. So we have Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Gad, Asher, and of course Joseph. So there's 70 in total with all their families in there that are in Egypt, and they begin to multiply, they become fruitful and abundant in this land of Egypt. Now, after many years, the king of Pharaoh dies, and there is a new king brought in. And this new king is not aware of Joseph and what he did and how he saved Egypt and made it so wealthy. Instead, he is more fearful that there's so many Israelites and they're overshadowing the Egyptians. So he thinks they're going to come and they're going to take over, and they will eventually start an army and just wipe out the Egyptians. That's his fear. So what he does is he puts all of the Israelites to work. They are slaves, and he makes them work really hard. So he has them grafting hard, making buildings and using making large boulders to obviously put together things. And they make the cities of Pithom and Rameses for Pharaoh. So as they're making these cities, they're actually getting stronger and they're multiplying even more. So his plan's not really working to almost weaken them and make them less than. In fact, it's making them stronger. And this is starting to grieve him as he sees all these new children coming into the world, and he's like, oh, this is no good. Let's make the children work hard. So let's have them work in the fields and doing all this. And it's not working. Things are not going as the king planned. So he ends up speaking to the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah. And he says to them, I want you to kill all the boys, but let the girls go. All the Hebrew boys, I want you to kill and let the girls go. And the midwives are fearful of what God would do if they were to do this. So they do not follow the king's orders. And he summons them towards him and he says, I told you to do this. Why did you not do this? And they said to him, because the Hebrew women, they are so different to the Egyptians. They end up giving birth before we even arrive. It's not possible. And God is kind to the midwives, and their families grow and they are abundant and fruitful. That is kind of what God always does. He makes sure they have a good life, a good offspring, and that they are well nurtured with the land. So that's what happens to them, and obviously there is still this multiplying, which is making the king of Pharaoh very nervous. So he ends up going to extreme measure, and he announces to all of the Egyptian people and the Hebrews, obviously he needs to know, that any Hebrew boy must be thrown into the River Nile. Be thrown. This is the announcement. No Hebrew boy is allowed to live. And so that ends chapter 1 quite dramatically. And now we move into chapter 2. And this starts off with a man from the Levi tribe that we've just described in chapter 1 there. And he weds a Levite woman. And they become pregnant and they give birth to a son. Now the mother sees that this son is fine. He is sort of like divine. There is that inner knowing that there's something special about this child. So she hides him, because obviously she knows that all Hebrew children have to be chucked into the, River Nile, killed. So she hides him for as long as she can, and then when he gets to such a point that she can no longer hide him, around 3 months, she creates a basket. She makes a basket that is waterproof, and she puts him into the River Nile, and his sister watches from afar see what happens to the baby. And now we see the king of Egypt's daughter is going down to the River Nile to bathe with her servants. And as she goes down there, she sees this basket and she asks one of her servants to go and get it. And they bring it to her and she opens it and she sees this baby inside. And the baby is weeping and crying and she looks on the baby and she's like, oh, you know. And the sister, who's been watching from afar, suggests that she get a Hebrew woman to nurse the baby on her behalf. And Pharaoh's daughter agrees to this. She's like, yes. So the daughter goes and gets the mother to the baby, and she is able then to raise the child. And Pharaoh's daughter says she will pay her for nursing the child until he's old enough, obviously, to become her daughter. And that is exactly what happens. She nurses him until he comes of the age, then gives him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he becomes her son. And she names him Moses because she found him on the water. Now we move into where Moses is getting older. And he grows up and he decides he wants to go one day to the area in which his people are from, the Hebrews, and he goes and observes them and he sees them working and being just like treated like slaves by the Egyptians. And he sees this one Egyptian beating down on this Hebrew, one of his people. And he looks around him, makes sure there's no one around that really sees, and he goes and he kills this Egyptian and he hides him in the sand. And then the next day he goes and he sees two Hebrews fighting with each other. And he's like, why are you fighting with each other? Why? And they were like, who are you to tell us what to do? Are you going to come and kill me like you did an Egyptian? And Moses is like, oh my goodness, somebody has seen me. This means, once this gets found out, Pharaoh finds out, and which he does. Pharaoh finds out and he orders for him to be killed. And Moses then flees and he goes out to Midian. And when he gets out there, he sits by a well. And there's a priest in this area that has 7 daughters, and they come up to the well to draw some water for their flocks. But some shepherds come up and they start like chasing them away, like, get away, get away. But Moses steps in and he says, hey, no. And he helps these women get the water and water their livestock. So the women then go back to their father and they tell the father what happened. He was like, how come you've come so fast back from watering? They were like, oh, well, this Egyptian guy came and he helped us and and we were able to. And he said, well, why don't you tell the guy to come over and we can feed him, give him some bread. And so they do that. He comes over and Moses decides to live with these people. They're like welcoming him in. And so he stays with them for a while. And father offers him his daughter, whose name is Zipporah. And he marries Zipporah and they have a son. And the son is called Gershom. I hope I'm getting these names right, but there are links under this video for each chapter so you can get the full names and read it yourself there. And in giving birth to this son, Gershom, he says, I have become a foreigner in a foreign land. And after a long period of time, the king of Egypt dies, passes away. And the Israelites who are slaves start groaning and grieving to their slave masters, saying, we are tired of this. We have been oppressed. We don't want to be like this anymore. And God sees this and looks down upon these people. And he remembers the covenant he'd made with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And he's concerned. He's really concerned about them. And this closes chapter 2. So now we open up chapter 3. And we see Moses tending to a flock. And he decides to take this flock over to the wilderness and comes to a place called Horeb, on this mountain where God appears to him. This angel of the Lord appears first to him in flames of fire within a bush. So this bush is burning. And Moses noticed this bush is burning, but it's not decaying or anything. It's just constantly staying burning. So he gets curious and he starts walking over towards this. And God sees him coming closer and he says, Moses, Moses. And Moses says, I am here. He says, do not come any closer. Take off your sandals. You are on holy ground. I am the Lord of your father, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And when Moses hears this, he hides his face. He's like really afraid. He says, I have seen the misery of my people in Egypt, crying as they are slaves, and I am concerned for their suffering. I have come down to rescue them from the Egyptians and bring them to greener pastures. Their cries have reached me, and I see their oppression. So go, I'm sending you to free them from Egypt. And Moses says, who am I to do this? And God says, I will be with you. So he's reassuring, he's not going to be on his own dealing with this big task. He'll be with him. And he's saying this burning bush is a sign. This is the sign where you will come and you will worship the Lord on this mountain when you have brought all the Israelites out of Egypt. And he says, suppose I go and I speak to the Israelites and I say, the Lord your father has come. What name do I give them? What do I say? What is your name? And God says, I am who I am. I am has sent me to you. Tell them, this is my name, forever, the name you shall call me, from generation to generation. So this from now on is what he wants his name to be known as, I am. And he says, talk to the elders, go to the elders, because they'll listen, they will listen. Tell them that God has come to rescue them and to lead them out of Egypt to greener pastures. And then he says, the king of Egypt is not just going to let these people go. There's no way he's going to let them go. God says, go to the king of Egypt and tell him that the Lord of the Hebrews has met with us. And he is telling us we have to take 3 days' journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord. But Moses is like, he won't let us go. He has to have something that's too compelling for us to make him go. And that's when the Lord says, I will strike the Egyptians with all wonders that will perform among them, and this will force the king's hand to let you go. And he also adds that I will make the Egyptians favour the Hebrews, so you'll not leave empty-handed. And he says to them, every woman is to ask her neighbour and any woman in her house for articles of silver and gold and clothing, which you'll put on your sons and daughters, and so you will plunder the Egyptians. In other words, you will rob the Egyptians, so they won't leave empty-handed. He's going to give them an open opportunity to get out of Egypt and move towards the land in which he promises will be greener, which will just be so much more abundant, and they'll have a better life. And that ends at chapter 3. So there we go, our beginnings of Exodus. We're seeing how life is changing for the people in Egypt from when Joseph was there. It's got very different. Times have passed on. Things have been forgotten. New rules are coming into play, new demands. People are viewing things from different perspectives, seeing a different way, and then force. When somebody is in power, they force their will onto someone. It's causing all this chaos in the land, very much a divide again between the Egyptians and the Israelites. So we're seeing this divide, and this is when we start seeing problems. Whenever there's a division, it's always a problem. Even there, if you look at how Moses is seeing like the Egyptian beating a Hebrew, but then you see a Hebrew beating a Hebrew, having a fight there. It's like, it doesn't matter even in your tribe, there's still that conflict. That's what these 3 chapters are really highlighting to me that way of division, that way that we can't seem just to get on. You know, there's always some kind of opposition coming at us. And so let's see what happens when Moses does get the people out of Egypt, where they're groaning and moaning about the slavery. Obviously, it's not great to be oppressed at all. But then, will we be able to live in harmony? You know, God is providing this wonderful place of green land, the opportunity to be abundant. So that's there. Do you think we'll just enjoy the land and live happily ever after? Why don't we seem to have that in our world? Why do we seem to need to pull these divisions? You know, it seems to be like the life force. Is it the tree of knowledge? You know, the tree of knowledge which we saw in the beginning. How we ate from the tree of knowledge, and having knowledge in our minds separates us because we see life differently. We don't operate like nature in this balanced way. We operate in this way of perception, of separation, of need. And yeah, let's see anyway how the story unfolds. And that I will leave with you today. Enjoy reading it in your own time, seeing what might come out and pull more from your reading of it. So we will stop there. We're at chapter 3 and we will continue tomorrow with more chapters from the book of Exodus. Let's see what unfolds. Thanks for being here, everyone. See you again soon. Bye.